Like a fine wine, a premium cigar is aged. Its pedigree is important, and it's expensive. Hand-rolled, packed in a mahogany box, impeccably presented. From seed to smoke, it's designed to stand apart.
There are cigars and there's cigars, just like there's wines and there's wines, and watches and any luxury product. And today, a really fine cigar may cost an average of $10 to $20 a cigar.
Unlike cheaper machine-made cigars, which are an automated product containing shredded tobacco, premium cigars are made from whole pieces of select tobacco, and entirely by hand.
Each cigar, from the moment you plant the seed to the moment that that cigar is enjoyed, and each leaf has passed from a minimum between 400 pairs of hands up to 500 pairs of hands.
That hands-on approach is evident in the Fuente Opus X rolling room of Tabacalera A Fuente y Compañía of the Dominican Republic, one of the largest family-owned and run cigar companies in the world. Fuente's top-of-the-line cigar is the Opus X. Each cigar contains 3 parts: the outer wrapper, the binder leaves, and the interior filler leaves.
As the cigar maker is creating the bunch, the inside of the cigar with small little tubes and creating this round cylinder, and after he rolls the 2 binders that hold the filler leaves together, it's put in the press at the cigar maker's table.
After binder and filler have been pressed for an hour and a half, the roller, who is trained for years, spirals the wrapper leaf around the interior leaves. It's not as easy as it looks. Too much pressure will tear a leaf that has aged for as much as a decade. The rolled cigars are sealed with gum arabic and then inspected.
When he finishes checking 50 cigars, he would tie them and weigh them, and they have to be precisely within 1 ounce. What this proves is that the length and diameter is exact, and that every specific leaf is in the right position and it's the right amount of leaves.
The annual output of 750,000 Opus X cigars are a small portion of the 35 million cigars the company will make by hand each year. The Opus X's will spend the next 12 months aging in Spanish cedar cabinets.
365 days, 24/7, with temperature humidity constant. What happens, you have a marriage of different tobaccos.
A year later, the cigars are finished with a band, a piece of Spanish cedar, and cellophane.
The Fuente Opus X has a certain spice, cinnamon, maybe even leathery. It's got a certain taste that's very unique.
Though they may consume a unique product, cigar smokers suffer from the same rate of esophageal and oral cancers as cigarette smokers, as much as 8 times that of non-smokers. But since most cigar smokers don't habitually inhale, they have a far lower risk of lung cancer than cigarette smokers. And nearly 8 times as many Americans die from lung cancer than from oral cancer and esophageal cancer combined. But in a business that focuses on tobacco's taste, cigar maker Carlos Fuente, of Cuban descent, uses Cuban seed for his most prized cigar. Where cigars are concerned, it all goes back to Cuba, and it always has. On October 28, 1492, 2 of Columbus's men, Rodrigo de Jerez and Luis de Torres, were the first Europeans to smoke cigars with Arawak natives in Cuba. They puffed on a giant cigar.
It's described by Rodrigo de Torres as thick as his wrist.
Over the next 3 centuries, as tobacco smoke spread across the globe, Cuba became known as a high-quality tobacco producer. But the entire business changed when the U.S. imposed a trade embargo on Cuba in October 1960. Many of the cigar makers and growers in Cuba relocated.
Most of the Cuban families who were involved with cigars and cigar making moved to countries in the Caribbean near Cuba that had very similar soils. And those countries included Honduras, Nicaragua, and Dominican Republic. Of course, some in Mexico and some in Jamaica.
Carlos and his father, Carlos Sr., ultimately moved to the Dominican Republic in 1980. They recognized the quality of the soil.
Cuba and the Dominican Republic, they're born from volcanoes. They're volcanic soils that are very, very fertile.
In this fertile soil, tobacco is grown from November to February.
After a certain stage, when the tobacco plants become maybe a couple of feet, 24 inches off the ground, then what we do is we tie them. Each plant, one by hand, is tied with a string.
The string stabilizes the plant, which has a shallow root system. The wrapper leaves, the most delicate part of the cigar, are grown beneath the cheesecloth shade.
It takes out approximately 15 to 20% of the sunlight. And what that does is help the tobacco to become a little bit more elastic, more pliable.
The tobacco is harvested by hand 3 leaves per week as they ripen. The leaves are then hung in massive tobacco barns to dry for roughly 55 days.
During this time, there's a transformation of the chlorophyll into the starches. And what happens is that as the heat from the bottom, by small little fires that are done very carefully, that heat rises to the top of the tobacco barn. There, the moisture evaporates.
Once dried, the tobacco is off to the fermentation warehouses for an initial fermentation in 4,000-pound bulks. Under pressure in these giant piles, the tobacco will heat up.
It could go as low as maybe 103 to 105 degrees Fahrenheit, up to 140. Once that you've found this magic moment, you take the box, you get your tobacco leaves, and you give it oxygen. You give it air so it breathes. And it's releasing all these nitrates, nitrogen. So the starches are converting into sugars. And the tobacco, as it ferments, it becomes sweeter, sweeter, and finer.
During a 6-month fermentation, as much as a third of the harsh-tasting nicotine decomposes. The tobacco's texture also changes from sticky to powdery, signaling that it's time to bale it and place it in long-term aging, anywhere from 5 to 10 years. After aging, the tobacco is finished in sherry barrels.
The wood contains the nuances of the sherry, and the tobacco is like a sponge. With time, it starts absorbing all those flavors and all those aromas from the wood.
It's nuances like these that cigar connoisseurs seek out, as well as drive demand and pricing in the premium cigar marketplace.